So have you ever looked at a really tall tree and just wondered, how does it feed itself? I mean, really feed itself, all the way from the tippy-top leaves down to the deepest roots in the ground? Well, today, we are going deep inside the plant to uncover its incredible internal delivery service.
Okay, so let's just jump right in with the big question. We know plants are amazing chefs, right? They cook up their own food, mostly sugar, in their leaves using photosynthesis. But here's the puzzle. How does that sugary energy, made way up in the leaves, get to every other part of the plant? How does it reach a brand new bud or the very tip of a root buried in the dark? That's the mystery we're solving today.
And here's our game plan. First, we'll look at the sheer scale of this delivery challenge. Then we'll get introduced to the plant's solution, what I like to call the Phloem Highway. After that, we're going to put on our detective hats and check out the brilliant experiments scientists used to figure this all out. And finally, we'll see why this whole system is absolutely critical for a plant's survival.
All right, let's kick things off with Section 1. We need to really understand the problem every single plant faces, this massive delivery challenge.
I want you to picture the leaves as these little solar-powered factories just churning out sugar all day long. But here's the thing. Every other part of the plant, from the woody stem to the flowers, and especially those roots deep underground, well, they're made of living cells, and those cells get hungry. They all need a constant drip feed of that sugary fuel to do their jobs and to grow. So how does a plant solve this massive logistical problem? Well, it has its own super efficient internal food delivery system. It's time to meet the Phloem Highway.
The absolute star of the show here is the phloem. Now, you've probably heard of xylem, right? That's the tissue that pulls water up from the roots. Well, you can think of phloem as its partner. It's a complex network of living tubes designed to do the opposite job, transport food down from the leaves to everywhere else.
And this whole process has a scientific name you'll definitely want to remember for your exams. It's called translocation. It's just a fancy word for moving food from the source, that's where it's made, in the leaves, to the sink, that's any part of the plant that needs to use or store that energy.
So, what are these sinks or destinations? Well, just think of the most energy-hungry parts of the plant. The food gets sent way down to the roots so they can grow deeper, it gets pushed up to new buds so they can burst into leaves, and it's pumped into developing fruits to make them big and sweet. Anywhere that's growing or storing energy for later is a key destination on this highway. Now, this all sounds like a pretty neat theory. But how do we actually know that the phloem is the food highway? I mean, scientists couldn't just peek inside. They had to get really creative. So let's look at the evidence they collected to crack the case.
And our first clue comes from a very, very unlikely source, a tiny little insect. Yep, meet the aphid, our star detective in this whole investigation.
Okay, this is seriously one of the cleverest experiments in biology. You see, aphids have this super sharp needle-like mouthpart called a proboscis, and it's so incredibly precise that it can puncture a plant stem and tap directly into a single phloem tube. So scientists let the aphid do all the hard work, then they'd snip the aphid away, leaving its little proboscis stuck in the plant like a tiny tap. This allowed the phloem sap to just ooze out, ready to be collected and analyzed. Just brilliant.
So, what did they find inside that sap? Bingo, exactly what they were looking for. It was packed with sugars, the energy source, and amino acids, which are the building blocks for proteins. This was the smoking gun, direct proof that the phloem was the transport system for the food made during photosynthesis.
And here's a really cool fact that just proves the point. The sap inside the phloem is under pressure, and it's so rich with sugar that aphids literally can't process it all fast enough. So what do? They excrete the extra as a sticky, sweet liquid called honeydew. If you've ever parked your car under a tree and it got all sticky, well, you can probably thank some feasting aphids for that. All right, on to our second major piece of evidence. This one is a bit more direct, but it's just as elegant. It's called girdling, or the ring barking experiment.
In this experiment, scientists carefully remove a complete ring of bark from a tree's stem. Now, the key here is that the phloem is in the bark, so when you remove the bark, you remove the phloem. And the result is, well, it's unmistakable. After just a few days, the area above the ring starts to swell up. Why? Because all that sugary food traveling down from the leaves hits a dead end. It literally gets backed up, causing a bulge. And at the same time, the part of the plant below the ring starts to wither because it's being completely starved of energy. This is clear visual proof that food travels downwards through the phloem.
So, we've identified the highway. We've seen the proof. Let's get to our final section and really understand just how critical this whole system is. It is not an exaggeration to say it's a matter of life and death. That ring barking experiment gave us a pretty big hint, right? So let's ask the question directly. What happens if that food highway gets completely and permanently blocked?
The consequences are stark, and they are fatal. If you sever the phloem all the way around, the food supply to the roots is completely cut off. And since roots are underground, they can't make their own food. They are 100% dependent on the leaves. Without that energy, the roots starve and die. And once the roots die, the whole plant is doomed. It's that simple and that critical.
And this isn't just some abstract biology lesson. This fact has huge real-world consequences, especially for people working in forestry and agriculture. It turns out lots of animals know exactly where the good stuff is. During winter, when food is hard to find, animals like rabbits and voles will chew the bark off of young trees. They're not just eating bark, they're trying to get to that sweet, energy-packed phloem layer just underneath. And if they chew a complete circle around a young tree, they are, in effect, performing the ring barking experiment, and that tree will die. That's exactly why you'll often see young trees in orchards or forests wrapped with wire netting at the base. It's to protect them from these bark eaters.
Okay, let's wrap this up with a quick review of the absolute must-know points for your exams. First, remember food is moved through a process called translocation using the phloem tissue. Second, know the two key experiments. The aphid experiment proved what was in the phloem, sugar, and the ring barking experiment proved the direction of flow, downwards. And finally, what happens if the phloem is damaged? The roots starve, and the plant will eventually die. And that's really the big takeaway, isn't it? It's this amazing, intricate phloem highway that connects the sunny leaves with the dark roots, delivering the energy that makes all of the plant's growth possible. It's what allows a tiny seed to become a massive tree. Thanks so much for joining